Saturday morning sunlight spilled softly over the neat rows of suburban houses in Maplewood Heights. The air was fresh, the faint scent of blooming lilacs drifting on a gentle breeze. For most, it was just another quiet weekend. But for Jamal, today felt different. Jamal stood on the cracked concrete driveway of his grandfather's modest home, his hands gripping the worn handle of an old lawn mower. The grass was overgrown, wild patches threatening to swallow the yard whole, and Jamal was determined to bring order to the chaos. This was more than just mowing a lawn. It was a way to honor Grandpa Joe, who had lived in this house for over 40 years, the neighborhood's unofficial historian, and a gentle soul everyone admired. Jamal loved these Saturdays. He'd spend hours outside, feeling connected to the land and his family's roots. But as he pushed the mower toward the thickest patch of grass, a sudden chill ran down his spine. From across the street, behind a tall hedge, a woman stood watching him intently. Her arms were crossed tightly, lips pressed into a thin, hard line. Jamal squinted. It was Karen, Mrs. Karen Preston, the neighborhood's self-appointed watchdog. She was famous for her sharp eyes, sharper tongue, and a reputation that made many keep their distance. To Jamal, she was the kind of person who made a simple task feel like stepping into a minefield. Karen's gaze wasn't casual. It was cold, calculating, like she was waiting for him to make a mistake. Jamal felt the weight of her stare, the kind that made the skin crawl. He tried to shake off the unease and focused on the lawn, humming an old blues tune Grandpa Joe loved. But Karen didn't move. Instead, she stepped onto her porch and then, faster than Jamal expected, marched down the sidewalk toward him, her heels clicking sharply on the concrete. "Hey!" she called out, her voice sharp enough to cut glass. Jamal froze, mower idling. "You're not supposed to be mowing that lawn." He blinked. "Excuse me? This is my grandfather's house." Karen's lips curled into a cold smile. "That's what they all say. But you don't live here. You can't just come in and start mowing without permission from the HOA. It's against the rules." Jamal's heart pounded. "My grandfather asked me to help. He can't do it himself anymore." Karen's eyes narrowed. "I don't care what he asked. This neighborhood has rules. You breaking them could cost us all." Jamal took a slow breath, trying to keep his voice steady. "I'm not trying to cause trouble. I'm just trying to help." Karen's expression hardened. "Trouble's exactly what you're bringing." There was a flicker in her eyes, something sharper, darker. Jamal sensed it wasn't just about the rules. It was deeper, something unspoken. Behind Karen, a few neighbors peeked out of their windows or stepped onto porches, curious but cautious. The street, which had been peaceful moments ago, now felt charged, electric. Karen leaned closer, her voice dropping. "You need to think twice about who you're working for. Some people don't belong in Maplewood Heights." Jamal's stomach twisted. The words hung in the air, venomous and clear. Before he could answer, Karen spun on her heel and marched back toward her house, leaving Jamal standing alone, the hum of the lawnmower suddenly loud and hollow. He looked around at the watchful faces, sensing the fragile calm was already breaking. What had started as a simple favor for his grandfather was spiraling into something much bigger, something darker. Jamal pushed the mower forward, but his hands trembled slightly. The neighborhood he thought he knew was not as welcoming as it seemed, and Karen's eyes were watching, waiting for the next move. The hum of the lawnmower filled the quiet air, but Jamal barely noticed the familiar sound anymore. Karen's words echoed in his mind like a warning bell. Sharp, unforgiving, impossible to ignore. "Some people don't belong in Maplewood Heights." The phrase burned hotter than the mid-morning sun. Jamal wiped sweat from his brow and and glanced up at Karen's house. The curtains twitched as she watched him, her eyes cold and unblinking. It felt less like concern and more like a challenge. Was this really about the HOA rules? Or something far more sinister? He pushed the mower toward the backyard, hoping to finish quickly and avoid more confrontation. But the uneasy feeling settled, like a stone in his gut. "Hey!" The voice sliced through the air again. This time sharper, angrier. Jamal froze and looked up. Karen was striding toward him again, this time with a neighbor in tow. A tall, thin man, whose face was unreadable. "You're making a mess," Karen accused, pointing at the mower tracks in the freshly planted flower bed near the porch. "You don't know what you're doing." Jamal frowned. The flowers had been there for decades. But Grandpa Joe always said the plants were stubborn, survivors. Still, Jamal hadn't meant to damage anything. "I'm sorry," Jamal said calmly. "I'll fix it," Karen snorted. "That's not good enough." Her companion spoke for the first time, voice low and rough. "We've all been watching, Karen. This doesn't feel right." Jamal's eyes narrowed. "Watching what? I'm just mowing a lawn." Karen's voice dropped to a venomous whisper, loud enough for Jamal to hear. "You people always say that." The words hit like a slap. Jamal stared, mouth dry. "What do you mean by that?" Karen's eyes glittered with disdain. "You don't belong here. You don't belong anywhere near my neighborhood." A heavy silence fell. The neighbor standing behind Karen shifted uncomfortably, but said nothing. Jamal's throat tightened. He had faced ignorance before, but never so brazen, so public. His hands clenched into fists. "I'm not going anywhere," Jamal said firmly, surprising even himself. "This is my grandfather's home." Karen laughed, a cold, bitter sound. "We'll see about that." Suddenly, Karen's dog, a large snarling bulldog, lunged forward, barking furiously. Karen yanked the leash back, but the dog's fury mirrored her own. Jamal backed away slowly, heart racing. The hostility wasn't just in words anymore. It felt like a physical force pushing him out. As Karen turned away, her voice carrying over her shoulder, she said, "You'd better watch yourself. People around here don't forget." Jamal finished mowing in a daze, the tension thick in the air. The neighborhood that once felt like a safe, quiet place was now a battlefield. That evening, Jamal called his grandfather, hoping to find reassurance. Grandpa Joe's voice was warm but tired. "Karen's been like that for years," he said, "always trying to control things. But you've got every right to be there." Jamal felt a flicker of hope. "I'm just worried it's going to get worse." Grandpa Joe sighed. Sometimes standing up for family means facing uncomfortable truths. Just be careful. Jamal hung up, heart pounding with a mix of determination and fear. The next day, he decided he would talk to the HOA board, try to clear the air, find a way to protect his grandfather's home. But as he drifted to sleep, a shadow crossed his window, a dark shape watching from the street, and in the distance, a car idled, its headlights cutting through the night. The next morning dawned grey and overcast, a stark contrast to the bright Saturday before. Jamal woke to a sinking feeling deep in his chest, as if the neighborhood itself was holding its breath. The uneasy silence outside was broken only by the distant hum of a lawnmower. Someone else was working nearby, but Jamal barely registered it. He stepped outside, ready to continue the task, when something caught his eye. A small folded note pinned to the grandfather's front door with a rusty nail. His hands trembled slightly as he unfolded it. "Stay out of Maplewood Heights. You're not welcome here." The words were scrawled in sharp black ink, jagged and aggressive. Jamal's heart pounded hard. This wasn't just a warning, it was a threat. He scanned the quiet street. No one was around. But the feeling of being watched wrapped around him like a suffocating blanket. For the first time, Jamal realized Karen's hostility was no longer limited to words. Someone wanted them gone, and they were willing to send clear, chilling messages to make it happen. Jamal considered telling his grandfather, but he knew Grandpa Joe was frail and already burdened by years of quiet struggle. This was Jamal's fight now. As he gathered himself, Jamal noticed movement across the street. Two men stood near a dark SUV parked under a street lamp, their faces half hidden in shadows. Jamal's pulse quickened when one of them slowly lifted a camera, snapping photos of the house. He ducked behind the hedge, heart hammering. Were they neighbors? Or something more? The sudden rush of adrenaline sharpened his senses, and Jamal realized he wasn't just dealing with a difficult neighbor. This was something bigger, something dangerous. He decided to visit Mrs. Alvarez next door, one of the few neighbors who had always been kind to Grandpa Joe. Maybe she could offer some insight. Mrs. Alvarez opened her door with a warm smile. That faltered when Jamal showed her the note. "Oh, Jamal," she whispered, shaking her head. "This isn't the first time. Karen has been stirring trouble for years, especially to families like yours." Jamal's jaw tightened. "Why? What does she want?" Mrs. Alvarez sighed deeply. "Control. Power. She sees your family as a threat. Not because of who you are, but because she fears change." Jamal swallowed hard. "What can we do?" She glanced around nervously. "Be careful, watch your back, and keep this quiet for now. People here can be unpredictable." Jamal nodded, the weight of secrecy settling on his shoulders like a stone. That evening, as darkness fell, Jamal noticed the faint glow of headlights parked just down the street. The car idled silently, engine running, windows tinted black. He caught a glimpse of a face inside, someone unfamiliar, watching. Sleep eluded him that night. Every creak of the house, every distant bark of a dog, sounded like a warning. The next day, he received a call from an unknown number. The voice on the other end was distorted, but chilling. "Stop mowing the lawn, or things will get worse." Jamal's fingers tightened around the phone. He knew this was no longer just neighborhood drama. It was intimidation, pure and simple. But backing down wasn't an option. The neighborhood was watching, waiting for him to react, and Jamal was ready to fight. Not just for the lawn, but for his family's place in a community that was beginning to show its dark underbelly. The community center's doors loomed large and impersonal as Jamal stepped inside for the monthly HOA meeting. The air was thick with the scent of stale coffee and whispered conversations, a stark contrast to the quiet neighborhood streets he'd walked just days before. Tonight, the room felt charged, like a battlefield before the first shot. Jamal's heart pounded as he scanned the faces in the crowd. There was Karen, sitting rigid in the front row, her lips pursed and eyes sharp as daggers. Nearby, a few familiar neighbors whispered among themselves, casting glances his way. The HOA president, Mr. Whitmore, called the meeting to order with a practiced, hollow tone. The usual chatter died down as the agenda turned to community conduct and property maintenance. Jamal raised his hand when given the chance to speak. The room fell silent, all eyes suddenly on him. "My name is Jamal Brooks," he began, voice steady despite the knot in his stomach. "I'm here to address recent incidents involving my grandfather's property, specifically the harassment we've faced from Mrs. Preston." Karen's eyes flashed with contempt. She stood abruptly, interrupting. "Harassment? That's absurd. We're simply enforcing the rules to keep Maplewood Heights safe and beautiful." A murmur rippled through the crowd, some nodding in agreement, others looking uneasy. Jamal swallowed and pressed on. This isn't about lawn care or rules. It's about intimidation. Threats that are racially motivated. We've received anonymous notes, surveillance, and warnings to leave. Karen scoffed loudly. You're twisting this into something it's not. Our community has standards, and anyone ignoring them will be held accountable. Before Jamal could respond, a voice spoke from the back of the room. Karen's been pushing this agenda for years, said a middle-aged woman with tired eyes. It's not just about rules. It's personal. Heads turned toward her as she continued quietly. She's used the HOA to target families she doesn't approve of, using community standards as a weapon. The room shifted uncomfortably. Jamal felt a flicker of hope. Mr. Whitmore raised his hands to regain control. Let's keep this civil. We'll investigate these claims. But even as he spoke, Jamal noticed something more unsettling. In a quiet corner, a man Jamal hadn't seen before exchanged a knowing glance with Karen. The man's expression was cold and unreadable, as if he were a shadow, lurking just beneath the surface of the neighborhood's calm. After the meeting, Jamal caught a moment alone with Mrs. Alvarez, who had attended quietly in the back. There's more going on here, she whispered, glancing around. Karen's not acting alone. The HOA board is divided. Some support her, some fear her. Jamal frowned. Why? What's at stake? She hesitated. Control of the neighborhood, property values, power. Jamal's mind raced. This wasn't just a personal feud. It was a struggle for dominance, and he and his grandfather were caught in the middle. That night, Jamal sat by the window, watching the street below. The dark SUV was back, parked just out of sight, its engine silent but ominous. His phone buzzed with a text. Back off or there will be consequences. Jamal's fingers hovered over the screen. He knew the stakes had just escalated. This was no longer about a lawn or an old man's home. It was a war for the soul of Maplewood Heights. The days blurred together in a haze of tension. Every step Jamal took felt shadowed by unseen eyes. The dark SUV remained parked at odd hours, the tires whispering threats against the pavement. He knew Karen's harassment wasn't random. It was coordinated, calculated. Late one evening, Jamal received a cautious knock at the back door. Peering through the window, he saw Mrs. Alvarez, her face pale but determined. He opened the door a crack. I have something you need to see, she whispered urgently, but it has to stay between us for now. Curiosity and caution warred inside Jamal's chest as he let her in. She pulled a small worn flash drive from her pocket and placed it on the kitchen table. This came from someone on the inside, she said, eyes darting nervously toward the window. Someone tired of Karen's games. Jamal plugged the drive into his laptop. Files appeared. Recordings of private phone calls, HOA meetings, and conversations where Karen's voice dripped with venom and racial hostility. She detailed plans to intimidate families like Jamal's, using rules and community standards as cover. One recording sent a chill down Jamal's spine, Karen laughing cruelly as she described a plan to make them feel so unwelcome. They'll leave on their own. Jamal stared at the screen, heart pounding. This was proof. Undeniable evidence of the campaign against his family. But it was dangerous too. If Karen or the HOA board found out, retaliation would be swift and merciless. Mrs. Alvarez's voice broke through his thoughts. We need to be smart about this. Show it to the right people, lawyers, journalists. But not yet. We have to prepare. Jamal nodded, resolve hardening. This was no longer just about standing his ground. It was about exposing a toxic power, structure built on fear and hate. The next day, Jamal attempted to share the recordings with a trusted community lawyer. But before he could, his phone buzzed again. Another anonymous message. "Drop this now, or things will get worse than before." Fear mingled with anger inside him. Someone was watching his every move. That night, Jamal's house was raked with headlights. The roar of a car engine shattered the silence just outside. He peered through the curtains to see a figure lurking near the porch, then disappear into the night. Sleep was impossible. Jamal knew he couldn't back down. This fight was bigger than a lawn, bigger than his grandfather's home. It was about standing up to a system designed to exclude and silence. But with every step forward, the shadows grew longer, the threats more real, and the question haunted him. How far would they go to keep him out? Jamal hadn't slept in days. The constant feeling of eyes on him, the ominous messages, and the dark SUV parked near the house had worn him thin. Every creak in the night sounded like footsteps. Every shadow seemed alive with menace. That night, as the clock crept past midnight, a sudden knock shattered the fragile silence. Jamal froze, heart hammering in his chest. He cautiously approached the door and peered through the peephole. A figure stood outside. A man in his late 40s, wearing a worn leather jacket, his eyes flickering with urgency. Jamal didn't recognize him. "Who are you?" Jamal whispered through the closed door. The man's voice was low and hurried. "I'm someone who wants to help. You're in deeper than you realize. Karen Preston isn't working alone. The HOA board has been compromised." Jamal hesitated, weighing the risk. The man continued, "I have information that could turn this around, but you have to trust me." With trembling hands, Jamal unlocked the door and let the man inside. They sat at the kitchen table, the dim light casting long shadows. "My name's Marcus," the visitor said. "I used to be on the HOA board. I saw what Karen was doing, using her influence to push families out, especially those she deemed undesirable." Jamal's eyes narrowed. "Why tell me this now?" Marcus sighed. "Because things are escalating. She's brought in outside enforcers. People who don't just threaten with words, but with action. I've seen what they're capable of." Jamal felt the weight of those words settle heavily. Marcus slid a small envelope across the table. Inside were photos, blurry but unmistakable, showing masked men surveying the neighborhood, making notes, watching the Brooks house. "They're planning something," Marcus said grimly. "You need to be ready." Jamal's mind raced. This wasn't just harassment anymore. It was intimidation, bordering on a coordinated attack. "Why are you helping me?" Jamal asked cautiously. Marcus looked away for a moment before answering. "Because I can't be part of this any longer. Karen's greed and hatred have poisoned the community, and it's destroying everything I believed in." Jamal nodded slowly, the path ahead clearer, but darker. That night, Jamal reinforced the locks on the doors and windows and set up his grandfather's old security cameras. Every creak, every whisper, every shadow would be recorded. Sleep was still, elusive. But now he wasn't alone. As dawn broke, Jamal stepped outside, steeling himself for the battles yet to come. The neighborhood's calm was a fragile mask, hiding the storm that was gathering just beneath the surface. And somewhere, in the shadows, Karen Preston was watching, plotting her next move. Jamal's nerves were stretched to the limit. Every day felt like a countdown. The pressure mounting as Karen's shadow darkened the neighborhood. The once peaceful streets now felt like a maze of hidden dangers. The security cameras he'd installed were a small comfort, but last night's footage had revealed chilling images. Shadowy figures lurking near Grandpa Joe's house, moving with purpose, avoiding the streetlights as if rehearsing a sinister plan. Jamal knew the next confrontation was inevitable. He arrived early at the neighborhood park for the weekly community gathering, a chance to meet neighbors and possibly find allies. But as he approached, he saw Karen already there, surrounded by a group of people who looked ready for battle. Her cold gaze locked onto his the moment he stepped into view. Without warning, Karen marched over, voice loud enough for the crowd to hear. "You're tearing this community apart," she hissed. "Your family doesn't belong here, and we won't let you ruin our neighborhood." Jamal squared his shoulders. "This community is about all of us, not just the ones you choose to accept." Karen sneered. "Don't fool yourself. People, like you don't belong." Suddenly, a woman stepped forward. It was Mrs. Alvarez, her voice firm and unwavering. "That's enough, Karen. We won't stand for hate disguised as community standards. We want peace. Real peace." Murmurs of agreement rippled through the crowd. Karen's face twisted in rage. "You're all fools. Mark my words. This isn't over." Jamal felt a surge of hope, but knew better than to believe the battle was won. Later that evening, Jamal reviewed the security footage again. A new face appeared. A man with a tattooed sleeve, scanning the neighborhood with cold eyes. Jamal's blood ran cold. He called Marcus, who confirmed his worst fears. "They're planning a direct attack," Marcus warned. Tonight, Jamal's heart pounded. He called Grandpa Joe, explaining everything. "Stay safe, son," his grandfather said, voice steady despite the worry. "We've faced hard times before." Jamal spent the night on alert, ready for anything. Just as the clock struck midnight, headlights flooded the street. The dark SUV returned, along with 2 more vehicles. Jamal's security system triggered alarms. The figures moved quickly toward the Brooks house. Jamal grabbed his phone, dialing 911 with shaking hands. As the night erupted in flashing lights and shouting voices, Jamal realized this was the moment everything would change, for better or worse. The sirens wailed through the night, piercing the tension like a knife. Jamal stood on the porch, flashlight trembling in his hand, as police cars swarmed the street. The figures lurking near the house scattered, caught off guard by the sudden onslaught of blue and red lights. Karen Preston's dark SUV screeched to a halt, but she was nowhere to be seen. Rumors would later swirl about where she vanished, but, for now, the neighborhood breathed a fragile sigh of relief. The officers moved quickly, questioning the trespassers and securing the perimeter. Jamal explained everything, showing them the footage stored on his laptop. Proof of harassment, intimidation, and a coordinated campaign to drive his family out. As dawn crept over Maplewood Heights, Jamal felt a cautious optimism for the first time in weeks, but the fight was far from over. That afternoon, Marcus returned, this time with unexpected news. "I spoke to some of the HOA board members," Marcus said quietly, glancing around. "There's a faction that's willing to stand with us. People tired of Karen's tyranny." Jamal's eyes widened. "Really?" "Yes. They want change. They want a community that welcomes everyone, not just a select few." Over the next weeks, Jamal and Marcus worked tirelessly alongside these new allies. They attended meetings, rallied neighbors, and organized community events focused on inclusion and respect. The transformation was slow but palpable. One evening, as Jamal was locking up Grandpa Joe's house, he noticed a figure waiting nearby. It was Karen, but this time, her demeanor was different. Gone was the fiery rage, replaced by a weary resignation. "I underestimated you," she said quietly. "Maybe it's time to change." Jamal regarded her carefully, wary but willing to listen. The neighborhood had been tested by hate, fear, and intimidation. But in the end, it was the resilience of a family, the courage of a few, and the strength of an unexpected ally that forged a new path. Maplewood Heights was no longer a place defined by exclusion. It was a community reborn,